probably the longest red carpet I've ever seen. Very good treatment, and very little came out of it. For Vladimir Putin, this summit was not about making peace in Ukraine. It was about making peace with the United States, or maybe just with Donald Trump. I think this summit was very productive for Vladimir Putin. So just a little bit more than a week ago, he was threatened with new U.S. sanctions unless he agreed to a ceasefire. And here we are just a little bit more than a week later, and he's had a full-scale summit at a U.S. Air Force base in Alaska with the U.S. president, probably the longest red carpet I've ever seen. Very good treatment, and very little came out of it. I think it's important to understand that for Vladimir Putin, this summit was not about making peace in Ukraine. It was about making peace with the United States, or maybe just with Donald Trump. So he accomplished that. He made his peace with Donald Trump, and his goal is to separate the Ukraine conflict from bilateral U.S.-Russian relations. It certainly looks like there's been a shift in Donald Trump's position, but we've seen this movie before. Back in May, Donald Trump was demanding an immediate ceasefire, threatening sanctions, and then he had a 2-hour phone call with Vladimir Putin, and he changed his tune and started saying that instead negotiations should begin, which was exactly the position that Vladimir Putin was advocating. So today we see something very similar, a threat of sanctions, demands for an immediate ceasefire, and then after a long conversation with Vladimir Putin, echoes of what Putin wants, namely a grand peace agreement and a ceasefire as only part of that.
What else they might see on the horizon in Eastern Europe. So if you...
the order is very important for Ukraine. Ukraine wants an immediate ceasefire and then talks to begin, whereas the Russians want the reverse order. They would like to have an agreement in place, and the ceasefire is only part of that. And what does this do? This gives Russia the ability to keep on making facts, creating facts on the battlefield while negotiations continue, and it also gives them the option of dragging out negotiations. Right? Yeah. This is. We have nothing to do with this. He keeps on repeating this, yeah. And it's not a question of some territory. Ukraine will be able to accept the de facto occupation of some territory for an undetermined amount of time. Ukraine will not be able to, of course, accept recognizing that in a legal sense. But most importantly are these security guarantees. How do they know that Russia will not attack them again? And this is the main sticking point. We're hearing different things about what was talked about, but I am sure that they have not reached an agreement on this point with Vladimir Putin. I think there is a very big possibility that Volodymyr Zelensky will be offered a poison chalice when he comes to the White House on Monday. It's possible that Donald Trump will say, "This is what I've agreed with Vladimir Putin. This is a reasonable agreement, and we now need your signature on it." And that Volodymyr Zelensky will be put before this dilemma. He can either agree to a deal that is most probably disadvantageous to Ukraine, or he can walk away from it, in which case the United States may say that they are washing their hands of this peace process and may see a justification in ending U.S. support for Ukraine.
Well, the president certainly said that, at least on Truth Social. Whether that's a firm commitment by the government, unclear. It does make the task much more difficult. A ceasefire can be temporary. It doesn't have to solve all of the problems that are outstanding between the two countries, but it would accomplish what Trump keeps coming back to, which is to stop the killing. Coming up with a complete agreement requires not just stabilizing the front lines, but making an agreement about any territory swaps, which are very controversial, about sanctions, and about war crimes, about the return of any citizens that have been taken. There are just a lot of issues on the table that would need to be solved. And so that task is much more difficult. The course of the summit was a surprise. The meeting was supposed to go on for 6 or so hours. It went on for about 3. The press conference was called very quickly. There was a huge scramble by the journalists. Then it ended without any questions, and Putin then got on his airplane and went home. That was encouraging in the sense that it meant that the two sides, particularly the US, went back to its allies and partners, Ukraine and the Europeans, to talk with them before it took any further steps. It did not happen that Putin and Trump made a deal and then presented it to the Europeans and Ukraine. And that had been the concern a week earlier when Witkoff had gone to Moscow, and it looked like, in fact, the US and Russia might make a deal without Ukraine being present and ignoring the Europeans. So the fact that they did not make a deal, and that President Trump is talking to Zelensky, in fact, he has talked to Zelensky, Zelensky's going to meet with him. The Europeans have had the chance to weigh in several times. That's all very encouraging. That doesn't mean that at the end of the day, there won't be an agreement that Ukraine doesn't like, but at least we're in a much better place than we were a week ago.